I have found two different musician sources for the album I'm about to talk about. One of them is the cover of this album is someone named Larry Klimas on it. And then the other one features a list I saw of the actual people at the BBC recording that the album comes from. Says that it's Albert Wing, who was in the '88 band on this. I don't know which one it is. Klimas is a saxophone player, probably plays the same instruments Albert Wing plays. I don't know which one's on here, but the BBC listing I saw had Albert Wing on it, but then the cover of the album says Larry Klimas. So maybe Wing's just on the Zappa thing and Klimas is on the other thing. I really don't know. Sorry for the confusion. That doesn't matter. This album is ridiculous. But if you know who's on the tracks I'm talking about on this album, please let me know in the comments. Having a hard time figuring out based on what's on the internet. All right, on to this awesome album. What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. This is part 5 of my, the FZ variations, where I'm going to talk about cover albums of Frank Zappa. Not a big cover album fan generally, but I'm trying to maybe branch out and like just experiment and explore some new things. And today's album I'm going to talk about is the Vista Philharmonic, the BBC Frank Zappa Memorial Barbecue. I somehow had not heard about the Vista Philharmonic until I made another video talking about, I think it was the Zappa Universe video, and somebody mentioned it in the comments, and I was like, I am going to go find that, and I Googled it, found out about the band, and this is who is in this band. It is Vinnie Colaiuta and Arthur Barrow on drums and bass, respectively. That rhythm section. Tommy Mars playing keys, dropping some vocals every so often. Tommy Mars had played with both Vinnie and Arthur during the duration of their entire run with Zappa. Then you get Walt Fowler, Bruce Fowler, Albert Wing, Kurt McGettrick, 4 of the 5 horn players, 4 of the 5 members of the horn section from the '88 tour. No guitarist, just these musicians. And just floored that this existed. I read about it a little more, and I found out that the name of the band, the Mar Vista Philharmonic, came from where Arthur Barrow's studio is located. Apparently the Mar Vista something. And when I read that, I was like, oh, I know that. Like, I knew about that. I knew that they got together and jammed. I guess I just either never followed up and knew that they had an album, or for some reason I never sought it out. But I got it. It is 2 sides, 1 album, about 25 minutes on each side. And it was recorded in Los Angeles in November of 2003, but it was played on the BBC 3 in December. I'm assuming the BBC 3 is the BBC in London, because apparently Londoners and Englanders like Frank more than we do here in the States. So something like this was able to be played. 2 25-minute pieces. The first piece, about 25 minutes long, is a medley of Frank Zappa tunes. I've seen it on the internet referred to as the Shut Up and Make a Jazz Noise Here medley, but I've also seen the track listing is just the name of some of the songs. And the songs are Treacherous Cretins, which goes on for about a good, healthy 10 minutes. And it's a super chill Treacherous Cretins. Like, you can hear the vamp kind of in the back, like just kind of happening, but it doesn't kind of pop up until you got some horns coming in and some different sounds, and like sort of a mood has been established. So it's not this like really predominant vamp that's there, but it's clearly there. And they jam on this idea, different people taking solos for about 10 minutes. And then they slide into a Chunga's Revenge. And the very first time we get a really concrete, like everybody coming together to play something moment is when they go into the dun, dun, dun. And I think it's like all the horns are maybe playing that. And it doesn't really feel rehearsed as much as it feels like we know we're going into Chunga's Revenge. We all know how to play this dun, dun, dun. Like, we know how to play those notes. And so there's a very, very spontaneous vibe about this. Like, these guys know these songs. They don't have to practice them. Maybe they do, when they're jamming in Arthur Barrow's house, studio. But oh, and that was the thing. It's named after his studio where they used to get together and jam. I don't think I mentioned that. But there's a very like, oh, we're doing Chungas. Let's all come together and do the main theme. And then right after the main theme, Bruce Fowler gets a chance to solo. Fantastic. That goes on. I think that, no, that doesn't go on for, I think, how long is, what am I looking at, Treacherous Queens? I think Treacherous Queen goes on for about 8 minutes. And then Chunga's Revenge goes on for about 8 more minutes. And then after Chunga's Revenge, we go into a 5-5-5 jam. Like, we're not stopping and starting. We're like segueing into this. And the 5-5-5 jam, again, stays pretty like mellow underneath. You get that underneath. And it's not until, I think this is about a 6-minute jam. It's not until about 4 minutes in when all of a sudden Arthur and Vinny are really hitting that rhythm hard, and like you clearly know, it sounds like the beginning of the solo from the album. Sounds like we're getting to that part of it. And then that kind of like eventually dies out and fades out, and then the whole thing kind of flows in to an Inca Roads. But it's not like a full Inca Roads. It's like we're going into like the Inca Roads vamp where they would play the solo. The vamp where Vinny and Arthur supported Frank for some of his best solos ever. Think Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, Shut Up and Play Your Guitar Some More, the Return of the Sun of Shut Up and Play Your Guitar. Think those solos. Like, that's the vamp we're getting. And again, they're just soloing and jamming over this vamp. And at one point, I think it's either Albert Wing. I think it's Albert Wing. I think it's a saxophone player. Starts playing the da-na-na-na-na, like the post-solo melody, and other people join in, and it doesn't seem like it was necessarily a planned moment as much as the general idea was at some point we're going to go into this, and somebody started it and everybody kind of just joined along, and then it kind of falls apart towards the end, and then we get like this trailing end until like 25 minutes after it started, this jam ends. That's side A. And absolutely monstrous. And it's like, to describe, there's a very vibe to it. There's a chill vibe to it. There are some intense moments throughout it. 5-5-5 is definitely very intense. Treacherous Cretins has a really, really nice peak in the middle of it. Chunga's Revenge, as Fowler's solo starts to end, almost seems to have the bottom completely fallen out of it. And it becomes like, instead of like going up and getting more intense, it like goes down, but it gets intense in like a very entropic way where things are falling apart, and it eventually builds back up. And it almost seems like if I had to chart this, it's like Treacherous is pretty steady with a little peak, and then Chunga's just kind of takes it down, right? And then 5-5-5 has these like peaks throughout it, you know, but doesn't get too crazy. And then we get into Incas and it just kind of gets melodic and floaty. But the vibe, and I don't mean to impugn the characters of any of these musicians or imply that I know anything that I don't know, because I don't know anything about this. But if I had to guess, I would say that they all gathered at Arthur Barrow's studio around 4:20. And then a couple minutes after 4:20 is when they decided to jam. Because this is one of the most, it sounds fantastic. The lack of guitar, I think, helps a lot. The way just the different horn players are listening to each other and not taking each other's space. And when somebody steps up, like there are moments like before somebody steps up and really solos in Treacherous. There are moments after a solo in Treacherous. There are moments like as Chunga's Revenge works its way into 5-5-5. There are moments at the end of 5-5-5. There are moments at the end of Inca Roads. There are all these moments where like not a single person is stepping up and soloing, but the way they respect each other's space and the way they feed off each other. And like Vinny, other than when we get to 5-5-5, is a pretty restrained Vinny. Arthur is being Arthur to the best of his abilities. Like everybody, the solos are fantastic when people solo. Like I have listened to this a lot in like the last week. I absolutely love side A of this. I also really like side B, though it does start off with a slightly different tone. These both feel like completely improvised pieces of music. They don't really feel like, they don't feel rehearsed. There's an incredible spontaneity to all of it. It does feel like just a jam session that was recorded. But the second one, which on the BBC release, when they described what these songs were on like the BBC webpage or something. They called this Sad Spangled Banner. On the actual album release, it's called A New Policy. But it's got several distinct sections in it. It starts off with this bigger, almost bolder, almost big bandier feel that has a different flavor than the stuff on the first side. It's definitely a little more bogus pompy, and that's not the song Bogus Pomp, but just the pomp of Bogus Pomp. There's a slightly different energy, but then that quickly kind of devolves into like a really, really nice jam, which works really well, and it gets a little more frenetic, and people are popping up, and the energy kind of resembles more of the first side. And I think it's an interesting diversion, but so far, my least favorite part of this is like the opening sort of segment of A New Policy. But that jam that follows, fantastic. And then we get this really weird part in the middle where Tommy Mars starts singing, and I think he's improvising lyrics. It's Tommy Mars, the Tommy Mars delivery, as Tommy Mars always delivers stuff. So it's that voice. And he's pretty much, I think he starts off by going, oh, I think he's singing the Star Spangled Banner, but he only sings like the first two lines, and he's not doing it like he says one line, oh, say, can you see? And he's like, I think he's spreading them out. That's not, I don't remember what it is. He's not singing Star Spangled Banner. I think he's singing something else. But he's singing some like patriotic American song. He does like the first two lines, and then he starts improvising stuff just about America in general, and like, kind of commentary on politics and patriot. And there's an underlying theme of sort of frank critique in what Tommy Mars is singing about, right? But it's not too direct. It's kind of, if you don't know America, you might not get what he's talking about. And it's interesting. It is a very, if you don't like Tommy Mars's style of delivery, it is a little like, I'm not his biggest fan. I like him in envelopes, but other times he's got a very style that sometimes works. It took me a couple listens to like really get into this because I knew it was coming, so I was prepared for it. And some of the stuff says is interesting. The way the band plays off what he says is interesting. But when he's done, he starts doing a nice little chill solo, and then the band starts soloing, and that goes on for a little bit and a while, and everybody gets a chance to solo, or a bunch of people get a chance to solo. And then as we get towards the end, maybe like 4 or 5 minutes left, Tommy starts playing the Soup and Old Clothes vamp, the vamp that Frank inserted to Illinois Enema Bandit in like the 80s that I can't sing it, but it's on like the 81 Illinois Enema Bandit. You can hear it on there on like the Halloween 81. You can hear it on Soup and Old Clothes. Soup and Old Clothes from Shut Up and Play Your Guitar is a vamp from an Illinois Enema Bandit. So he starts doing that. And again, it's not the case where the rest of the band like commits to it, but they're definitely feeding off his energy. So we get this very loose, very freewheeling like Soup and Old Clothes jam. And as it begins to end, that's when Vinny and Arthur kind of commit to it and do a little bit of it for a while before we abandon it. And it ends after like almost 25 minutes. 50 minutes of absolutely fantastic, really chill, 4:20 in the afternoon, kick back, just sounds great. Everybody's performances are spectacular. Jazz music. Where would I rank this among all the other cover albums I've done so far? Have it in number 2. Only because I've only listened to it for a week. And I don't know how I'm going to feel about it in, say, years, which is how long I've had to appreciate the Ed Palermo Big Band, which has more songs. But I'm not saying that if this project goes on for a while, because there's a whole bunch of cover stuff I'm not listening to, I'm not saying that this album doesn't have the potential to jump up to number 1, because I really, really, really enjoy it. It might be recency biased. It might be that I've been coming home after I'm teaching summer school now, and summer school sucks, especially. I enjoy summer school. I love my class, but it's like 112 degrees out there, so I come home to a hot house. It exhausts me. I've been listening to this album like every day when I get home because it just puts me in the absolute perfect state of mind. I love this release. And it's only at number 2 because it's so new to me. It came out in like 2003. I've only been listening to it for a week. But gosh darn do I love it. But that's all I got, people. I highly, highly recommend you check this out. Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And if you do, let me know your thoughts on it. And if you don't like it, I feel bad for you because it's so good. So fantastic. But anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, and go listen to this album, people. Go listen to this album.